In your opinion, how much responsibility do executives at companies like PHub bear for the child abuse happening on their platforms?
We have evidence now of specific cases of prepubescent children who had videos on the site for years. And here you have the CEOs and the VPs discussing, saying it was fine.
What percentage of videos on mainstream platforms might feature exploited minors?
It's probably over 80%.
Have I consumed abuse material and just not known?
They had found dozens of illegal videos on PHub within minutes, even children as young as 3.
It's organized crime, period. It's hard to say that Google's complicit, but it seems like a little bit.
Oh, no,
if you're
they are. I would say that.
Let's start from the beginning. So you're on a mission to take down PHub, which is that's a heavy lift, man. What sparked this?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't something that I planned. It wasn't something that 10 years ago I thought, you know, in 2025, this is what I'm going to be doing. In 2020 is going to start. But at the same time, kind of had been preparing for it my whole life. So in the context of over 15 years in the fight against sex trafficking, I was paying attention to the headlines, and I was noticing that there was a trend that it wasn't just happening offline. It was being filmed. It was being monetized online. And so there was this intersection between what I call the big porn industry, and we can talk about that, and child sexual abuse and trafficking. And at the end of 2019, I started to notice some really concerning headlines. One story that I kind of credit to the launch of the Trafficking Hub movement was a story about a 15-year-old girl from Broward County, Florida, and she had been missing for an entire year, and she was finally found when her distraught mother was tipped off by a Pornhub user that he recognized her daughter on the site.
Oh, gosh.
And she was found in 58 videos being raped on Pornhub. And police actually were able to locate her, and they recognized the guy's face from the assaults in the video, and she was rescued from his apartment. She had been impregnated. It was like this horror story.
So she got kidnapped and then put in videos?
Well, no, she had been missing. So I think she might have ran away.
Sure.
And then she had been, nobody could find her for a year.
Oh my God.
And this is how she was found, that her mom was, notified that her daughter was on Pornhub, and she was actually in videos that were being paid to download. So it was a profit-sharing relationship with Pornhub, and they were splitting the profit from the sale of her rape videos. So that was really concerning. I had read that story a few days after my second child was born, Jed.
Yeah, when you're a parent, it all hits so different, right? I was telling friends of mine about the book, and some of the guys were like, oh, yeah, that's gross. And I was like, no, man. But then I was like, well, I have a daughter and a son, so there's just that layer of like, what if it were my kid? But guys, especially who don't have kids, are like, yeah, that's really gross. And it's just kind of like another horrible thing they've heard that week.
Yeah. I mean, I cared about this for so many years, but then when I have my own children and then it's just exactly like you just said. It's just emotionally, it hits you in a different way.
There's a door
to
open
a
in my
deeper
heart
place.
that didn't exist when I was a dude thinking about the gym and my next pizza or whatever.
You just can't, because there's nothing that could train, you could never... Yeah, it's just this whole other level of emotional connection and empathy, and you can imagine yourself in the position of that mother, all of that.
Yeah, that's true.
And then there was another story, a few others that at the time, I think they're really important because just opening this conversation so listeners can understand. I think victim stories really bring it home for people, at least for me as well in this season. So the London Sunday Times, which is a very credible investigative, newspaper in London, they had done an investigation at that time, and they had found dozens of illegal videos on Pornhub within minutes, even children as young as 3. And at the time,
that's so gross and creepy.
It is. It was shocking to read that. And they were calling out particular advertisers in this investigation because Kraft Heinz Unilever was advertising at the time on Pornhub.
What are they? Can I ask? What were they advertising? I don't see any ketchup ads. I don't see any Kraft macaroni and cheese ads.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact product.
Jeez.
But people can look up that story. Kraft Heinz Unilever, London Sunday Times. They called them out for that immediately. They were shamed. They apologized. They pulled the ads. But it was a big deal, at least in the anti-trafficking space. Yeah. We were paying attention to what was happening. And there was a woman named Nicole Adamando from New York who had, she had been abused by her partner. She had been raped. He had filmed the abuse. And he was uploading the videos to Pornhub, and she killed him.
Oh, my God.
And then she ended up getting sentenced to life in prison at the time. She had a legal team, and they were able to reduce her sentence to 7 years.
I can relate a little. I mean, I get it.
Yeah, it was a very dramatic case, and the pictures of her. She had 2 young children, and her being taken off to prison. It was just a horrific story. And then there was about 100 victims in California and San Diego that were part of this trafficking operation called Girls Do Porn.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yes.
Wasn't there a documentary about this?
Not a documentary.
Didn't Rashida Jones do something about?
Well, she did something about girls in porn.
Okay.
Yeah, and teens and all of that.
Okay.
But this was a specific trafficking operation called Girls Do Porn. It was run by a guy named Michael Pratt, who ended up on the FBI's 10 most wanted
I saw that.
list.
Where is that guy now, I wonder?
So he was found Christmas Eve, 2 Christmas Eves ago in Spain. He had become a fugitive.
Yeah.
Because he was wanted.
What a terrible life that has to be. Although Spain, nice place.
Yeah, well, he was finally found. And all his co-conspirators are in prison already. And now he's kind of in the process of finally being held accountable. But he was running a partner channel on Pornhub that was one of their most popular partner channels on the site.
Not while he was a fugitive, though.
No.
Okay, this
was
before.
Yes, and then so the victim sued him. The FBI, the criminal accountability for Girls Do Porn.
Yeah.
But the way that they had distributed their content and made it really very popular was through Pornhub. So they had, like I said, one of the most popular partner channels. I think it was over 600,000 subscribers. 600 million views and 800,000 subscribers.
And they're each paying like $5 a month or 10, whatever.
Well, so you subscribe to the channel,
okay,
and then they give you clips and they advertise, and then they drive you to pay for more content.
Oh, I see. Okay, but even still, multi-million-dollar business.
Yes, and they were splitting again. This is a profit-sharing relationship with Pornhub, and they were splitting the profits. And Pornhub was aware because victims were reaching out and saying, begging them to take these videos down because it was destroying their life. But today...
So they were tricked into doing the porn.
Oh, they were trafficked.
Okay.
And so there's no question, tricked. So, and that's, part of the definition, of course, of trafficking is force, fraud, coercion. If you're under the age of 18 and you're used in a commercial sex act, so if you're making money on that sex act that was induced by force or fraud or coercion, or if anybody's under the age of 18, you don't even need to prove any of that. It's just automatically trafficking.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so anyway, they were held accountable, but this was in the news at the time as well. And so all of this began to raise the question, how in the world was this happening on Pornhub? Because at the time, Pornhub was a cultural icon. It was all over the place.
Christmas sweaters and stuff, and you're like, these are whimsical and fun. And now I'm like, oh, I'm not getting one of those. These
cheeky,
are scumbags.
like advertise, walking New York Fashion Week. People are wearing their apparel. Jokes on Saturday Night Live, like faux commercials on Saturday Night Live, all of that, right? Mainstream brand, not to mention that at the time, so by the end of 2020, they had capitalized on coronavirus, and they had actually become the 5th most visited website across the entire internet.
Oh, all those people working at home, right? Were just like, let me take a quick break that I couldn't do.
They made traffic soar.
Jeez.
So they had also done some crazy PR stunts. Like they offered Pornhub Premium for free to the entire world, so that instead of paying $9.99 for ad-free Pornhub, so you could watch porn or you could watch real rape or child abuse ad-free on Pornhub. Like they were just giving it for free. So their traffic was better than ever. They were making more money than ever. They had more visits than Netflix and Amazon. They had 170 million visits a day. 62 billion visits a year that year.
Jeez.
And by the end of 2020, they had 56 million pieces of content on the site. So every year they were having enough content uploaded. It would take 169 years to watch if you put those videos back to back.
Oh my God, that is...
So that's
the scale is crazy.
At the beginning.
The scale is crazy. It's interesting because I first got this book and I was like, okay, she's going to be some like super religious person who's against porn. And then we had our phone call, and I was like, okay, that wasn't what I expected at all. Like a normal person who has a vendetta, rightfully so, against this horrific website. And then I read the book, and I was like, wow, this is an organized crime operation. This is not a sort of like, well, sex workers put their stuff up here. You watch a dumb ad, and you're done with your business. This is it's organized crime. Period. I mean, it's just an international crime ring that just happens to be something that everybody knows about and a lot of people use. There's really, once you read the book, it's like there's no difference between this and the Albanian mafia shipping cocaine or something across. At least there's fewer victims with people who are shipping drugs across the border. which is crazy to think about.
It is, and hiding in plain sight, right?
Yeah, hiding in plain sight. That was the phrase I was looking for. Yes.
Just under everybody's noses, millions of people a day. And so to the story, so I was paying attention, and I was up late one night. My baby had just been born a few months earlier.
Not sleeping at all. Yeah.
He was very upset because he had a birth complication called a shoulder dystocia, which I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but anyway, he was born, but his shoulders were stuck, and so I mean that's could be a life and death situation. And he pried out with force, and he was hurt. And anyway, we were both in quite a bit of distress at the time, but he was up, crying. So I was up late when I was the early hours before dawn, February 1st, I remember, and I was consoling him and thinking about these stories, and a question came to mind of how in the world did this end up on Pornhub? And a phrase my dad always used to say, he was just a very wise man, and he always used to say, assumption is the mother of all screw-ups. And thinking about that, the idea that we're all assuming that this is legal, vetted, consensual material, because that was their tagline. That was what they presented to the world. And they spent millions of dollars on their PR campaigns to, save the oceans. And they had this whole arm of Pornhub called Pornhub Cares, right?
So weird, yeah.
Right? Sure. And save the bees and all this stuff. And so I said, well, let me just test the upload system. So then I put the baby down after he went back to sleep, got, camera out, took the, video of the keyboard and the reg, and then uploaded and found out what millions, so the point of hidden in plain sight, millions of people already knew, because they were uploading to Pornhub every day, that there was no requirement for ID or a consent form. Anybody anonymously with a VPN in under 10 minutes using an email address, just a random email address, could upload a sex video to Pornhub. And there you go. And that's how the site became infested with videos of real sexual crime.
Jeez, it's crazy. And I think I'm probably not alone. It makes you feel guilty for ever watching porn in your whole life, because you're like, oh my gosh, have I contributed to the bottom line of this company? The answer is almost certainly yes, in some small way. Or have I consumed abuse material and just not known? The element of fraud in the crime of sex trafficking, that's important and interesting to me on a nerd level, just as an attorney, because what that means is essentially you could say to somebody, hey, I'm going to pay you to appear in a video, and then they leave, and I just say, I'm not paying you, or I trick you in some way saying, hey, I've got a job for you, you're gonna have to strip, and then it turns into a sex video, and that is illegal. That is sex trafficking. So it's a little bit of a shade there. It's not like you don't have to grab somebody off the street and then force them. It's not Taken with Liam Neeson, right? It's not some crazy thing like that. You can have somebody who thinks they're getting a job at a restaurant in another state or another country, and ... they're sex trafficked because they don't have any money and they don't have a way to leave, and you're telling them you'll let them go if they do this, and you're telling them it's not going to be uploaded anywhere, but then it is. That is trafficking.
Yes.
So you could even have somebody who you say you're going to have sex on camera for money, and they say, okay, fine, but you don't tell them it's going to be uploaded. That's still sex trafficking. And that's the important point here, I think.
Or they didn't even necessarily need to know that there was going to be money or not. So they could have deceived, defrauded, coerced. And we're talking about adults, because when they're under 18, it just doesn't matter what happened if they have a video on the site. Now, the monetization piece, I think, is really important when we're talking about the definition of trafficking, because a lot of people don't realize that what constitutes trafficking is that commercialization. When something of value is exchanged for the coerced sex act or the underage sex act. Now, with regard to the website, so we call it tech facilitated trafficking, because this might be free porn. 80% of the money that was, 80% of the content on Pornhub was free, but it was heavily monetized. So the ones that were benefiting from it are the owners of Pornhub, are the executives of Pornhub, who are selling 4.6 billion ad impressions on Pornhub every single day.
Wait, per day? I thought you were going to say per year or something. Oh my God, that's a lot of ads.
Exactly. That was how they were making most of their money, on free porn. So free porn is not free. Yes, it's heavily monetized. It has a high human cost, clearly. But 20% of that would be pay to download content, where you could enter into this profit sharing relationship with Pornhub, where you could put the content behind a paywall You have to like, pay to download that content. And in one horrific case, there was a 12-year-old boy from Alabama, and he was drugged and he was overpowered and he was raped by a man named Rocky Shea Franklin, who had one of those profit-sharing pay-to-download relationships with Pornhub. And he filmed the assaults, and he uploaded 23 of those videos to Pornhub with titles indicating that they were abuse. And this is important when we talk about complicity, right? Because Pornhub, in its defense, made a huge mistake.
We have content moderation, clearly not really.
They had 10 people working per 8-hour shift, and we could talk about that.
Yeah,
but they tried to say, and they do say, we had somebody viewing, manually approving every single video before it went live on the site. Now, we know that that's not true.
Yeah, clearly
that's not true. But if it was true, well, that means that they were approving videos with a 12-year-old drugged boy with titles such as Uncle Secret, Young Ass's Best. I mean, things that would clearly say this is a child.
Right.
And then once it was discovered, he was a verified uploader in this pay-to-download relationship. And then police found out. They reached out multiple times to Pornhub demanding the videos come down. They were ignored multiple times. It stayed up for 7 months, getting hundreds of thousands of views.
Which were all monetized, I assume?
All monetized. So that whole time it's just earning revenue, getting those pay-to-downloads. Then he was arrested, and now he's sentenced to 40 years in prison. And the boy is suing Pornhub.
Good for him.
Good for him.
What is he, 20 now? It's been so, I mean, they'd never
He
take
recently
forever to
turned
take the
18.
Oh, but this poor kid.
And then originally he sued with his mom, and then he became old enough to just do it
I was
on his own.
exaggerating to try and keep it light, but it really took 6 years and counting, and this stuff was up for months and months and months when he was a child. This is terrible.
Terrible. So when they say we viewed and approved, that means that complicity was even deeper.
Yeah.
If they're trying to say that, why would they say that? You know, we know it wasn't true because they were just skipping through. Like, you know, moderators through the course of this came forward to me and to investigators and to the attorneys and all of that, and produced documents and schedules and showing that they had 10 or under moderators per shift working not only on Pornhub, because Pornhub was owned by a parent company,
MindGeek, right?
MindGeek, who had earned virtually a monopoly on the mainstream, most popular global porn sites and industry.
They just buy everything?
So with a $362 million loan from Colbeck Capital, the previous owner of Pornhub rolled up the industry, buying most of the most popular porn sites and brands and pay sites and tube sites, and Pornhub was the flagship site. So it had Pornhub and its sister sites. So it'd be YouPorn, TubeA, GayTube, XTube, ExtremeTube, on and on. And these moderators were not just moderating the millions of videos on Pornhub. They were in charge of all the porn tube sites.
There's 10 people who have 8 hours to go through 400,000 uploads a week or whatever it is.
Exactly.
Something like that.
They were actually, they were reprimanded if they were watching less than 700 per 8-hour shift.
Videos?
Skipping through them, just skipping through them. They were incentivized to be so they have said, they put it this way. Our job was to allow as much content to go through as possible.
Yeah.
Like, because the free user-generated business model of free user-generated porn relies on massive amounts of content to be picked up in the Google search results, to drive massive amounts of traffic to the site to sell those 4.6 billion ad impressions, right? So they were incentivized to just get as much through. Some of them were watching, the more experienced ones were watching even up to 2,000 videos per 8-hour shift, just clicking through those videos.
Can you imagine having that job? This is like psychological trauma for sure.
It really was, yeah. And one of the moderators, and he gave me permission to share this, it was especially hard for him because he was sexually abused as a child himself.
Jeez.
And so it was especially traumatizing for him. And I think that was one of the reasons why he started, when he heard the stories about what was happening on Pornhub, wanted to come forward and reveal what he knew.
Oh my gosh. So the content moderation thing is just a joke. Essentially, it's one of those, like, we have to technically have this department because...
Right, just to say.
Right, just say we have it, yeah.
Yeah, it was ridiculous because in their defense, so I started, when I discovered all this, I started the hashtag Trafficking Hub. And just to reiterate what we just said about trafficking, the reason why I did that was because, any underage victim and anyone forced, fraud, or coercion on the site is a victim of trafficking per our statutes because these are heavily monetized videos, right? So they're using the trafficking statutes now to sue. They can be held criminally responsible for all of that. So that's how that, some people might say, well, how is that trafficking? Well, it's because it was monetized.
It's monetized.
Yes.
Let's take a second here because I want to put something on your radar that could actually change the way you feel day to day. You know that feeling when you're doing everything right? You're eating the salads, you're skipping the dessert, maybe you're dragging yourself to the gym 3 times a week, but you still feel a lack of energy, digestion's a little off, joints are achy, and your doctor's like, oh, let's just try another pill. It's like the whole system is set up to manage symptoms instead of actually fixing what's wrong. That's where Rivero comes in. I signed up to try Rivero. I've got to say, I'm impressed. What they do is they treat chronic disease at the root cause instead of papering over your symptoms with medication. A lot of the issues people deal with, so obesity, diabetes, autoimmune stuff like arthritis or Crohn's, some of it is, of course, not just random. Rivero dials in a high-protein diet personalized to you, backed by science, designed to restore gut health, reduce inflammation, get your metabolism working the way it's actually supposed to. You don't have to count calories. You don't have to do 2-a-days in the gym. You eat real food. You feel full. You actually start feeling good again, and you're not doing this alone. Rivero gives you a full medical team right in your pocket, so you have access to doctors, coaches, daily support, biomarker tracking. Your whole care plan lives in the Rivero app, so they're checking your labs, they're watching your progress, they're walking with you every step of the way. And most people who join Rivero, they start seeing results and reducing their medications within weeks. And right now, Rivero is giving you 10% off your first month. Just head to Rivero.com/Jordan to sign up. That's REVERO.com/Jordan. Honestly, if chronic illness is affecting you or somebody you love, this is worth checking out. It might just be the thing that finally moves the needle.
Look, I'm a guy who went to college with internet, so I've seen my fair share of porn, especially in the early days. You see videos with drunk women who can barely move, they're on and that's the point of the video, and it's really gross. And that is, I would imagine, also no one can consent when they don't know where they are and they can't keep their eyes open. I mean, this is not. So this is everywhere. This is not like you don't have to look very hard, I would imagine, on a site like Pornhub to find something bad. My question is, Google's indexing all this. So it's hard to say that Google's complicit, but it seems like a little.
Oh, no,
if you're
they are. I would say that.
I would agree. I would agree with you, because if you're indexing something and it's like 12-year-old boy gets raped, what? Your search engine is indexing this, which means it found this, and you're just going to go, yeah, okay, well, we're just going to surface that as the first result because it matches the best. How is there not a flag in Google that goes, we found a lot of these rape videos that are on a website. Should we block that entire website or call the FBI or something? No, just put it on the list like the other search results. I mean, that's an unreasonable course of action.
I agree with you 1,000%. And one of the employees told me, senior employee said, Google is where Pornhub lives or dies.
Of course, if they didn't index all these titles, they wouldn't need to create all these different videos to
exactly.
surface
And
search
Google
results.
has the power to suppress. So they are just not innocent bystanders in all this, because Nick Kristof, when he did his article, Children of Pornhub. Yeah, he's the 2-time Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist from the New York Times that took this. He heard about this, but the Trafficking Hub campaign went viral. Just to give people a recap of what happened. So the Trafficking Hub campaign went viral. I started a petition. I wrote an op-ed about this, an essay, got a lot of traction. The petition went viral, 2.3 million signatures today from every country in the world. Lots of media articles were written about this. And then Nick Kristof, did this huge investigation. One of the things that he pointed out was Google's power over all of this. And, I look at this and I see there are enablers. There is the bad actors, and then there are enablers who allow them to do this, who help them, who in fact benefit from their business, and doing so knowingly, right? So that would include the credit card companies, the financial institutions, and Google. And so I think Google, Nick Kristof pointed out that they don't let you surface results for how do you kill yourself.
Oh, they don't? Good. I mean,
they took that ability away from people to search that and find a result that would teach them that. This is what he wrote in his article. I haven't actually tried it for myself.
Yeah, I've never thought to Google that.
But he said, likewise, they could suppress user-generated porn sites known to be infested with rape and trafficking, and not allow that traffic to go. And I have dozens of examples of Google search results that are confirmed. If that link was clicked on Google, it would go to a confirmed case of child abuse on Pornhub, and I've shown those to Google.
That is also that's a very interesting case, again, from a legal perspective, because Google is also monetizing things via ads and sponsored links, and it's like, okay, well, how much do the search results that you're indexing result in monetization for your company? Arguably, there's a nexus there. So you're also, in a way, of course, they got that Section 230 where they're like, hey, we're not responsible for the things people put on the internet. Okay, but you're creating another product by creating the index and the search results.
Well, that is exactly right. And right now, Pornhub and MindGeek, they're losing their motions to dismiss based on Section 230 because they helped curate, they helped tag, title, surface. They created thumbnails.
Yeah, the image search. It's all there. Google creates that on their own servers. This isn't just something they're pointing to. They're creating a separate. That's the lawyers are making the argument that I would also make. There's a nexus there because of that.
Yeah, and then knowingly benefiting.
Sure.
So in the U.S., not only is it illegal to engage directly in trafficking, but knowingly benefiting from a trafficking venture where you knew or you should have known that this was happening, you can be held liable for that. So I think there should be a lawsuit against Google.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's amazing how much power they have to stop something like this. And they just aren't doing it because there's not enough noise.
Right.
Well, yet. Well, you're working on that.
Let's work on that next.
You're working on that.
but financial institutions, they are, so when we started this, we could look at the kind of map of who were the primary enablers. And what we identified early on was, yes, for sure it was the search engines, but even above them would be the credit card companies.
Can I put a pin in that? Because I have plenty to say about that.
Oh, yeah, of course.
People are also, the thing that I didn't understand necessarily was, if the uploaders are making money from uploading the videos, you have to know who they are because you have to know who to pay. How are they getting paid?
The uploaders?
Yeah.
So that was that 20%. So the 20% of content on Pornhub where it was the pay to download content, they would identify themselves.
They have to.
So Rocky Shea Franklin was one of those uploaders. Now, the problem was they were identifying the uploader. They weren't identifying the individuals in the videos. So we have numerous cases of victims who are currently suing Pornhub who were part of those pay-to-download. They called it the Model Hub program, where they were, quote-unquote, Pornhub models that had these verified accounts where they would show an ID, they would show where to get paid, but they wouldn't be verifying the individuals in the videos.
See. Okay.
Yeah, so that's how that was happening. But 80% of the content on Pornhub or more was just the free content. It was anonymous.
I see. And
totally anonymous.
That maybe points to another website where somebody can go. Like, I'm trying to figure out why somebody would upload free stuff.
Okay, they upload free stuff the same reason why they upload it to Facebook.
Clout?
It's clicks, it's views, shares, comments.
But who cares? Like, you're going to prison for 40 years so you can get comments?
Because they're not going to prison because they could use a VPN to upload and use an anonymous email address.
I see.
So nobody could ever know.
So the risk was nil, basically. Yeah.
There was no risk whatsoever.
Jeez. Imagine abusing somebody and you're not even also getting paid for it. It's like the height of sociopathy, right? It's like you're not even just a heartless bastard who will do anything for money. You're a heartless bastard who is just not doing it. You're wasting your time on this just to get comments and you're ruining someone's life. Like, it's I can't wrap my mind around it as a normal person who doesn't have massive psychological damage. I don't get it.
The scary thing is that because of the scale of these sites and because they're not the dark web, right? These are the mainstream sites and these are people that we're interacting with every day. I mean, because of the scale, right? It has to be. And a lot of them were people who were, so Pornhub had intentionally put a download button on every single video. Meaning, and this is important when you think about liability, because if there's a child sexual abuse video, that is illegal to distribute and possess. But they were allowing people from their servers to actually possess those videos on their devices all over the world and re-upload them again and again. So, to a rape that might be uploaded. So yes, that initial upload happened from that perpetrator, right? But then, millions of people a day would have the opportunity to then download it, and then they are the re-uploader. So they then redistribute it again and again.
I wonder why they allowed downloading and re-uploading. They must have wanted people to re-upload it with different titles so that they would get indexed by Google.
I asked that question. Exactly right.
Yeah.
They wanted, because to them, it didn't really matter what was in the video as long as it was inventory.
So you have 100 of you have 1,000 of the same video on Pornhub with a different title, and they don't care.
Just as long as it has different tags, as long as it has a different title, it's more content. And so it was incentivizing people. They wanted people to do compilations. They wanted people to download and re-upload.
Oh, and edit stuff or whatever.
Exactly. And just to get more content. That is exactly why they had a download button. But at the same time, understanding that they had a site that was infested with videos of real sexual crimes.
So somewhere, a bunch of guys, I assume a bunch of guys, made a decision that said, hey, if we do this, we're potentially liable for distributing child and illegal pornography, child sexual abuse material, rape videos, etc. But if we do allow it, we get more inventory. And they were like, well, we're never going to get caught for the illegal thing, so just do the other thing that makes us more money.
I think that they had an arrogance like that.
Yeah.
I think they had to have had
you
an
have
arrogance
to, yeah.
like that,
or there's just no lawyers anywhere near this place, which I don't believe if you're making that much money.
They have a chief legal officer who was there from 10 years ago, who's still there today.
Wow. That guy's got a dirty...
His name is Anthony Penhalley.
That's a dirty attorney right there.
So,
and I mean that in the figurative sense. I'm not accusing this person of any crimes. I am accusing him of being a disgusting scumbag, though.
There was an arrogance to all that was going on. I think that they thought they were just too popular, maybe too big, just nobody's... I don't really... That's a question that I sometimes wonder.
Yeah.
What were you thinking?
What were you thinking?
Did you think you would never get caught?
I want to talk to the lawyer and go, what was your plan for when this eventually came crashing down?
This was the plan. It was, how can we make as much money as we can, as fast as we can? And this was the business model that they set up to the point where, in the discovery process with the litigation now, I mean, we've even discovered more than what's in my book. So we recently found out things like the executives had emails and documents that they were sharing with each other where they would not allow, so it would be recommended, we need to suppress on our red words list words like childhood, minor, young, and they wouldn't. And that they were tracking to the dollar how much money they were making every month on categories and titles that contained child sexual abuse material, like the teen categories, because those were some of the most popular categories on the site.
Right. So if we block this tag, we can do it, but it's going to lose us $10 million a month.
They knew.
And they were let's not do that then.
They knew to the dollar. They were tracking how much money they were getting on these various categories. Now, obviously, all of the videos in those categories would not be illegal, right? In a teen or a very young or young, old young, small tits, things like this, it's not all going to be illegal. A lot of it is 18-year-olds who look underage.
They dress you up weird or whatever.
A lot of it was actual teens that were in these videos and tweens.
How desensitized are you to stuff like this? Because you just said a bunch of stuff where I was not really necessarily expecting you to to say it. And you just must be, in a way, like there's a part of your brain that's just so deep in this, but then you're like a normal person with a child also. It's got to be kind of strange. As lawyers do this too, right? You're a defense attorney and you're looking at gory murder photo, crime scene stuff, and then you have to go get a latte and maybe not think about that for 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think that I have just been so immersed in all of this that it just doesn't really
it's compartmentalized,
yeah. It's not like a clinical, I don't want to say it's like that I'm detached or that it's like a
it doesn't come across that way, but I just didn't expect you to say, well, there's the small tits category. I was like, geez.
But see, this is the thing is that maybe at first it was uncomfortable for me to talk about it, but I forced myself because the thing is that I think people have to hear it. Like I don't want to talk in vague terms too much.
You're right.
And that's in my book too. It's like I was really trying to balance because I undershared. Like, you may feel like this is so graphic and descriptive.
You could tell the publisher was probably like, do we need this page?
Oh, they were,
like, can we remove the chapter on the thing? Because that's really like, we want to sell this in other areas, other countries. When this comes out in another country, you're going to find out what censorship is really like. When the Russian edition comes out, we need all of the stuff that refers to sex removed from this book.
I haven't had that experience.
It's 12 pages long now.
I just got a Ukrainian translation offer. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
But I thought that it was important not to be vague, to be specific, because I think that a lot of people want to just disregard this as, you're just oversensitive about this. That this is really consensual content. You just don't understand. Yeah, you don't know consensual.
When you read the book, it is clearly not that. Like, it's very clear. And I think guys, on some level, guys who have frequented these websites, you see it and you kind of go, that's something was wrong. Like, you've come across it at some point. It was interesting in the book that you mentioned that adult film stars, like the ones who work in legitimate sort of vetted industrial whatever porn, they are the ones who often report the videos because they're looking, one, for their pirated, stolen content, but then they come across something where they go, oh my God, this is a child.
Yes.
So they find it all the time. And it's funny because you see somebody like Jenna Jameson being like, this is a cesspool that needs to be taken down. And you go, what an unlikely ally to be, because people will say, and I'm sure that your critics say this, you're just a prude that's against porn. That's your problem.
I get
so you're
that
making
all the
this
time.
up.
Well, that was their kind of ammunition to try to quiet this, to try to deplatform or discredit.
Of course, the most obvious.
This is a religious moral crusade, right wing, to shut down all sex on the internet.
Right.
And at the same time, you have porn performers who are some of my greatest allies in the fight, because they're, and sometimes they had to be quiet about it because of the MindGeek monopoly, and they would get blacklisted if they would speak publicly, because although they hated Pornhub, because the free porn tube sites, to your point, what you just said, was they destroyed the legal studio produced porn industry by allowing, obviously they allowed the rape and the child abuse and all that, but they were just allowing pirated, copyrighted content all the time. So we had, porn performers who were complaining, just saying, shut this down, because I'm spending 2 hours a day scouring MindGeek's porn tube sites trying to get my own stolen content off the site. And so they hated it.
When I was in my early 20s, a friend invited us to a porn shoot in, of course, the Valley. And we thought, this would be funny to go and see. And it was gross, right? The girls were not in a good condition. They were like probably partially intoxicated. But what was interesting was the guys who were shooting it, they were like, you got to leave. You're not in a condition to work. And I remember thinking like, these guys have professional, there's a professional operation. They sent home the girls that were intoxicated or high. That was not expecting that. And it made me kind of realize there's these different tiers, right? There's the horrific illegal gross stuff that we're talking about now. There's professional adult film shoots that happen where there's like catering and lighting people and stuff. And it's kind of, it's not necessarily my thing, but it's a thing that it's an industry. And then there's also like maybe the Playboy Mansion, which is like adjacent to that, and it's just totally not, it's not appropriate to mix all this into one snowball. There's just these different layers, and they get really seedy and gross as you go down, of course.
Yeah, it is true. And there is this distinct difference between, the porn valley, it almost feels historical now because everything has migrated to mostly the free user-generated porn sites, but it still exists, like the studio-produced content where they have to abide by, and this is really important, USC 2257. This is a law that we've had since 1988 in the United States that requires age and consent verification. It came about when there was an underage victim, Tracy Lords, who was underage, and she was being used in these porn
She's
videos.
Super famous, correct? I feel like I've heard that
name like you would have heard her name. But it was because it became obvious, right? Any thinking person understands that if you don't verify for age and consent, in porn, you're going to have illegal content proliferating in the industry. And this has been something that they accept in the studio-produced professional porn industry, mainstream, and they abide by that for the most part. And if you don't abide by that, it's a criminal offense. The DOJ has the right to inspect those records at any time, and if you don't have them, you can go to prison.
Yeah.
So they take it seriously. However, the problem is it just didn't translate into the internet age.
Sure.
And so that is a huge issue. And that is one of the things that we're fighting hard for, is to create those standards where you have an intro and an outro, right? In some of those videos, in a lot of those videos where you say, hi, my name is da-da-da, I'm here, I consent to this, and then they do a post, a shoot interview as well. Like, they can have those standards. Now, you're not going to get as much traffic. You're not going to get as much content uploaded, but that's the price to pay to have a legal operating industry.
Once you pointed this out, well, not once you pointed this out, sorry, they were not super amenable to fixing this problem, Pornhub.
No.
there was a point at which you're applying enough pressure where you can see them swapping out and deleting videos, right? And so it's essentially proof they knew that the problem was there the whole time, because they had no problem finding all these videos they needed to delete once you applied enough pressure. What's interesting to me was in the comments under the videos, you mentioned this in the book, they censor words like rape and underaged. So if that's flagged and censored automatically, well, theoretically, if you see that pop up 15 times in the comments of one video, you could block that video and then have a manual review of that, thinking, oh, maybe there's underage, rape, whatever in this video, because people keep saying that there is. They just didn't do that. They just went, oh, let's just block the words out so that we don't have to. It's really so clear as you look at the way they handled this problem, and I put that in radio air quotes, handled. They just didn't want to. This is not just they were lazy or they were incompetent. This is it's so clearly deliberate at a certain point.
Yes, the devil's in the details of all of this. Exactly, the fact that so they would have this is f***ing rape would be the comment, and they would censor rape. And this would happen, and it was confirmed by the moderators. This is exactly what they were doing. I saw this enough times to say, what is going on here? Yeah, they are censoring those words. And when they got in trouble for the stuff like the unconscious, the drugged, so then they started to take out the word drugged from a title, but leave the video up.
Right.
And so you could see the title, it would be like, you could tell that it would have said that, but just that one word would be taken out. The video is still there, or they would swap it out. Things like that, where they were just trying, instead of actually acknowledging the inherent, deeply flawed business model that they set up, they had to do stuff like this. And it even goes down to things that we discovered, like the fact that they intentionally hired one person out of 1,800 employees, one person to work 5 days a week to review videos flagged by users as terms of service violations, including rape and trafficking. So, and what they did was they had a policy, and they're in emails actually uncovered in Discovery, where the CEO is discussing with his VPs these policies and talking about them, and he calls it good and reasonable. They had a policy where a video had to be flagged 15 times in order for it to be put in queue for review. So a victim could have their video on Pornhub and then flag it 14 times. They could even flag it 15 times because it had to be over 15 times. Sure. And they had a backlog of 706,000 videos. And we have evidence now of specific cases of prepubescent children who had videos on the site for years with 13 flags, 14 flags. And here you have the CEOs and the VPs discussing this policy, saying it was fine.
Jeez, it's terrible. And just so Pornhub out there, staff, if you know, and you send me a takedown request for this, I'm really backed up. I've got 800,000 requests for taking down this podcast. It's going to be a few years, but I'll get to it. I promise.
I mean,
We're
this is publicly available information that is in court documents.
Of course.
And we can see that.
No, of course. Yeah. I'm just,
I know.
You can imagine somebody going, you need to take this down. You're defaming my corporation. We're on it. I got somebody who works 3 hours a week.
Right.
And they are just slammed. It's a busy operation we got over here. So the private sharing on Pornhub, which I didn't know existed, right? I guess this is like unlisted videos. Tons of pedophiles are using this because it's basically like YouTube, but you can put up sex videos and you can put up private stuff that is essentially not even going to be found by anybody because you need a specific link. So they're hosting this content too, which is, again, obviously illegal to even possess, distribute, monetized or not, because it's child sexual abuse material. I have to, I should have put this trigger warning, I suppose, at the top of the show. This book, I'm not a crier. There's points at which this book is upsetting. It's just, if you're a normal human who's well-adjusted or even moderately well-adjusted, there's just gross depictions of rape and abuse. You did a good job of towing the line of this where it's not gratuitous, but you did a good job of explaining just how bad it is without making it traumatizing, I think. And I just wanted to give you props for that because it's not an easy topic to cover.
I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I kind of labored over
I'm sure you did. And your editor was probably tearing her hair out. Just, what can we leave in?
They did want me to tone it down, and I did.
Sure.
I did. But also, I just said, look, at the same time, it has to ring true. And people, and I didn't want to traumatize people, so I'm so glad that you said that. Mm-hmm. But I did want people to experience it in a way, the way that I experienced it. And so that they could feel how I felt when
you do get that pit of the... stomach feeling, pit in your stomach feeling, without being like, I need to vomit out of my car window right now, right? You know, I was listening to it while driving, and it was just like, there's points where I was just like, this is pause, take a couple breaths, roll the window down, get some air. You know, it's like that. So, but I think people will enjoy this book because, again, the payoffs are there, and we're getting to those in a bit. The ownership of Pornhub, right? This is my friend, my producer actually said, hey, aren't they just in Montreal? Can't the RCMP just go in there and be like, hey, you guys are hosting child sexual abuse material, sorry. Get this out of here. They're in Montreal. What's going on? Isn't this Canadian owned? But not really. So tell us how the ownership is structured.
It's a very complicated ownership structure that we still don't fully understand even today. But they were based in Luxembourg for tax purposes. They had offices, their moderation offices, and other offices in Cyprus. They had offices in Romania, in London, British Virgin Islands. They had their headquarters in Canada, so that's where they had most of their employees, and they were operating. So that was their headquarters. Okay. They had offices in LA. Today they have offices in Texas as well. They were all over the world. And so in that way, they did that on purpose. I mean, this was, in a way to avoid responsibility in any one place.
I used to do real estate finance, and you have these investors from like Saudi Arabia, and you go, oh, that person's not investing in our U.S. entity. They're investing in our Cyprus entity, which whenever I hear Cyprus and British Virgin Islands, especially if you hear them all in one cluster, and you hear now you also hear like Dubai or UAE, of course, so you hear these, there's certain places where you go, Where's Guernsey again? Oh, it's an island off the Isle of Man. It's like, these are all places where you can basically hide money. Like if Vladimir Putin's friend has an account there, that's the company you're in.
Yes.
And that's what these places, that's kind of what they were doing.
And not only hiding money, they were hiding themselves. I mean, they were hiding their own identities from the public for years.
So this is like shell company owned, I'm guessing, or different shell companies.
They had, it was like 200 sister companies, related sites, PO boxes, bank accounts. That they, companies that would appear and then disappear and appear and disappear and interrelated. And, it's just very complicated. That was probably the part of all of this that I understood the least. That was the most difficult for me to wrap my head around.
Yeah, you basically need a lawyer to decipher this nonsense.
Forensic accountants.
Yes, forensic accountants.
Lawyers and they did that. And the lawyers that are suing Pornhub today, they took 2 years of jurisdictional discovery. They have went in and they've tried to understand all this. And in doing that, they actually were able to now rope in the hedge funds to the lawsuits. So, we haven't really talked about that. But yeah, the victims are suing, and they're not only suing Pornhub and its individual owners, they're suing the hedge funds, they're suing Visa, and trying to hold everybody accountable.
Good. Oh, Visa? Oh, they're not going to like that, are they? We did skip over some of the credit card company stuff. The payment processors, because I assume Pornhub takes credit cards for selling, premium stuff or whatever?
No, it was for even the ads. So,
I see, for buying ads.
For buying
that makes
the ads,
sense.
for selling the premium memberships, for the pay-to-download content, all of that was being monetized by the credit card companies and PayPal. PayPal actually disengaged with them right when that Heinz Unilever story came out by the London Sunday Times I told you about. PayPal was like, we're out.
Things are grim when PayPal is the upstanding citizen in this particular story, because you think of credit card companies like, oh yeah, they're behind me, that somebody charged me for something they didn't charge me. I called them right away. I'm going to go ahead and guess they did not immediately respond to your query and were horrified and unplugged the money machine.
Well, they said they were. They said they were so concerned, and we were, against this kind of content. But it was a lot of talk, and it was really hard.
They were so concerned until they saw how much money they were making from Pornhub.
Yeah, and they were charging a lot, because these are high-risk transactions, so they get to charge more per transaction on porn transactions than normal transactions.
I didn't even think about that. Right. Yeah. So instead of 1%, they're like, hey, look, we got to charge 3.8%.
Or more.
Yeah.
I've heard even up to certain cards or different financial transactions are even more than that. So significantly more. And what was interesting about all this, at first we said, okay, looking at this, how do we move them? How do we go after this? And yes, of course, it was like public shaming. But one of the things that was early on we understood was it was the credit card companies, and we knew this because there was a site called Backpage.com.
Oh yeah,
a number of years ago.
Shady
it was kind of like a
Craigslist.
template. It was like Craigslist, where they were selling cars and they were selling kids. And one of the things that was really effective was going after the credit card companies. So we kind of had that. But then the former owner of Pornhub came forward, Fabian Tillman, the guy that had that $362 million loan to roll up the porn industry, and he's the one who put Pornhub on the map, and he had sold the company, I think, 6 or 7 years before all this started, and he came forward to me in the summer of 2020 to say he wanted to help, and one of the things that he said was, go after the credit card companies. The only thing they care about is the credit card companies. And
Good
so that
tip.
was a confirmation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But hitting them in the wallet, right? That's always generally a good idea.
Yeah. Well, especially if that's their motivating factor. I mean, that's all they care about. That's the reason why we saw the payoffs that we did later on in the book with them taking down content. And
so tell me about this Faraz guy. First things first, he sounds like a dangerous psychopath. I mean, this is not a nice person. This is he's gross by every metric that you can find. He just strikes me as a disgusting human.
Yeah, I learned a lot about Faraz through dozens of hours of conversations with company insiders from the company experiencing him as an employee, but also people who were close to the family. And I have to be careful who, I can't really say too much about all of that because I don't want to identify these people. But I learned a lot about, his personality, and it was interesting. I tried to kind of be as detailed and honest as I could about him to describe his character, who he was. I mean, he was actually, very dedicated to his family at the same time.
Isn't that weird? Willing
to completely exploit other children and other people. And but
it's also very mafia. The whole thing, like I said in the beginning, is very mafia. The banking and shell companies just reeks of organized crime. And then, you got the heads of this thing. I'm a family man. I have breakfast with my mom every day, but also I have child sexual abuse material on my website. And if I don't do it, someone else is going to do it. These sort of justifications that mobsters have.
Yeah, I hope that people really do get to know as much as you can because they did hide themselves. So one of the things I really wanted to do as much as humanly possible was let the world know who are these people, what are they like, and to really expose them, because at the same time that they were exposing for profit the bodies of unwilling victims since 2007 and profiting from that, they were hiding themselves. So they were using fake names like VP of Pornhub, Corey Ehrman was using pseudonyms all the time in the hundreds of media articles. And the former majority shareholder of the company was completely unknown to the world. I mean, he had hidden his identity for so many years. And actually, Fabian, the former owner, is the one who told me his name for the first time.
Interesting.
And we were able to expose him, Bernd Bergmair, and he was the majority shareholder, living part-time in Hong Kong and London, and he was from Austria. But these men tried to hide themselves. So one of the things was, let's actually show the world who they are and hold them accountable.
It's interesting, right? Because if you're in Silicon Valley and you invested in Uber, you cannot shut up about your good investment in Uber. And if you've invested in Duolingo, you can't stop talking about it. You invest in Pornhub, you got 13 shell companies, a fake name, another fake name, a fake house, a P.O. box, a fake car. I mean, it's maybe you're doing something that you are not proud of at this point, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's very obvious this is not a hedge fund that says, I've got thousands of investments. I don't look at every single one. MindGeek, what is that? No, you knew damn well that there was something wrong because you hid your identity from that investment, and yet you're on Squawk Box talking about all your other investments.
Yeah.
Make it make sense, pal. Have you been threatened because you're dealing with a mafia-like business and shady characters with zero scruples?
Yeah, definitely. That has been part of the whole process. And I've experienced a lot, death threats, rape threats, family doxing, hacking, being falsely reported for possession of child pornography, which never happened.
Of course, yeah.
And
that's kind of almost predictable, right? We're going to accuse you of doing the thing that we're doing because then it makes us all, it's so ambiguous now. I mean, it's an old play.
Yeah, that's happened, and there's been kind of a lot, kind of a stress on my family through all of this as well. But yeah, I mean, that's it. To me, it's like it doesn't even compare to some of the stuff that the victims themselves have been attacked and had things happen to them, and just that what they've had to go through in identifying themselves and speaking out has been so much worse.
There was that strange, possibly not a coincidence, that happened where a couple of the victims came out speaking about this, and then weren't they kind of like attacked somehow?
Yeah, there was actually, and it was a crazy thing. I felt like I don't know what is going on here, but it was at the same time within days of each other in different parts of the world. There were separate victims who had come forward publicly. A lot of the victims were coming forward anonymously and being connected to attorneys. I mean, at the time, I had victims coming forward as the petition was going viral and all the news stories and everything, almost on a daily basis. Victims were coming forward. But some of them, said, I'm going to put my name out there. I'm going to speak publicly about this. And it was 3 of them. And they were in different parts of the world. Within days of each other, each one of them was physically attacked. And they were just roughed up.
Yeah.
They weren't, it was an intimidation thing. One of them had even sent pictures of notes that she was getting on her windshield after work that were talking about her sexual abuse and things like that. And it was just, it was frightening to just
cannot
say, like,
be a coincidence, right? It's not like somebody got mugged in Spain and another person had a threat happen in Baltimore. It's like very specific.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's that you think that, how could this happen? How could this be a coincidence? But at the same time, you can't prove that it wasn't a coincidence.
Sure.
So you feel like, in the sense, I felt like I was going crazy. What is happening here? How could this be real? But it was this was actually happening.
You're dealing with organized crime, though. That's the thing. I'm comfortable saying that because it's a company that engages in criminal activity, knowingly or otherwise, depending on who you ask. You've been a bit of a vigilante in the past as well, yeah? There's the plumber who scammed your sister's car transmission. Tell me a little bit about that, because this is in your DNA, right? This is something.
Yeah, reflecting back on that, there are some stories. People say, like, why did you do this, and how did you stick with it? And some of that, I think back on my history, and sometimes I think certain personality traits are just genetic. Like, they're just in you. So, yeah, I've had experiences over the years where a crooked plumber takes advantage of my husband. So he's a builder, and he's, takes all the money for a job he never does. Find out that he had actually done that to many other people looking on the internet. They're complaining about the same guy. Texting him saying, hey, listen, you give that money back or you're going to regret it. He didn't listen. And I ended up connecting with the victims throughout the county who, all shared the same story, connected with the police, actually connected with an ex-girlfriend of his I found on social media.
Oh, that's always the key, isn't it?
And she told me a lot of interesting details, and found out that he was going to try to take off to Hawaii with all this money that he'd taken from all these victims, and actually found out the airline, the flight. And I told the police, and he was arrested, and he was sentenced, and now he's paid everybody back with interest.
Oh my gosh, amazing.
So that
I'm just imagining this son of a bitch sitting at an airport sipping champagne like, I've gotten away with it, this is amazing. And the police are like, there he is.
Yeah.
And then $400,000 plus interest later, this guy's just sitting around lamenting. I mean, it's got that just feels so good.
But it was like, I just couldn't let it go.
No.
Especially, it started with somebody that I care deeply for, and then this was so wrong, and I just had to go after it. And then a used car salesman had sold my sister a lemon of a Honda with a junkyard engine and failing transmission, and she drove it off the lot. The check engine light goes on. She begs him to take it back. He won't. I go over there, listen, this is wrong. You sold her a lemon, give it back. He wouldn't. And so I just stood out there protesting. I got a permit, stood outside of his little car dealership for days in the rain, protesting, telling every single person that they had gotten, that they sold a lemon, and he lost all his business. And anyway, he
because the news covers it once, and it's like, the owner.
The news didn't cover it.
Oh, they didn't?
No.
Oh, I thought they were going to be like,
oh, no. The news didn't cover that. There was no news. It was just me with a sign saying, hey, turn around. He sold us a lemon, failing engine. And day after day, he came out, gun threats, yelling. His partner quit. I just said, I'm not leaving until you give it back. And I was serious, and then he finally did.
Wow, yeah. He did the math finally.
Yeah.
This crazy. We're just gonna stay out here all month.
I mean, I guess that was kind of similar. Hit him where it hurts, right? Yeah. Like, he was losing his revenue. Nobody would buy a car from him because
you'd have to be crazy to buy a car with a protester from a dealership with a protester standing out front saying he sells lemons. You'd have to be crazy. Jeez, I love it. I love being on your team. I think it's fun to. I also am a person who has trouble letting things like that go. And sometimes you have to, of course, but if you don't, if you're just wronged by somebody, I've got this personal policy where if a company screws me over, I want to do at least 10, ideally 100x the financial damage. So if I lose $50, yes, I should let it go, but I want to do $500 in damage. And often I overshoot because I've got a big platform. So if I say this online company screwed me over, don't buy from them, companies pay me a lot to advertise positive things on this show. So a negative impression, is it worth at least that much?
Yeah.
So all I have to do is do a minute and a half of a monologue about why this company sucks. And usually after a while, you don't have to do that, right? Because you go to the live chat and they go, well, our policy is we're not going to refund this. And I go, here's what happened to the last company that I did this. You just kind of explain it. You go, I'll save you the Google. Here's a link. Here are the stats. I'm going to say what happened, and I've got this chat logged, and it's not going to look good. And then it's like, give me 24 hours, and you get an email from a manager that says, we're refunding the entire year. Sorry for the billing mistake.
Good for you.
I can't let it go, because they're doing it on purpose. It is a revenue. It is an item in their revenue. The amount we've been able to bill from people where they just don't check their statement for this particular charge.
Yes.
And they go, well, we'll refund 90 days because that's what you can dispute on your credit card.
Yep.
No, you added this without my permission. I am not paying you for whatever international phone service for a year.
Yep.
I would rather swap my cell phone over and cost you $25,000 in lost business. That's what I'd rather do. And
well, good for you. I mean, you have the heart for justice. Being an attorney also in your past, and knowing that they're doing that to other people.
That's what really pisses me off. I can afford to lose $50. I can afford to lose $500. You know who can't? Somebody who that was their rent, and now they're screwed. It's not that really pisses me off. That really pisses me off. Yeah, so we have that same.
We share
that. We got that thing. Yeah. The threats you were getting were scary. They created escort ads with your name, which is creative a little bit, kind of. Which reminds me, I have to cancel an appointment I had this evening. Fake. But that's. What do they do? They expect people to then call you, and then the people are trying to set you up.
It was like intimidation tactics. Just
it's so
kind
dumb,
of harassment,
though. It's so juvenile.
Right? Yeah. I mean, and I, all of these things that happen. I currently have a situation right now, and it's not, as nefarious as this, but just an AI thing saying that I'm a porn star, using an interview and saying, describing this particular scene that I was in and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, all of these things that were happening, they were intimidation, harassment. Some of them, I can tie directly back to the company. Some of them are just people who are financially incentivized, who support the company, who don't want to see revenue disturbed, are angry that this is happening.
Partners, whatever.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Random people doing this kind of thing. But that was certainly happening. But I always kind of had this feeling of this may be uncomfortable, this may be painful, but when you're going through it, it's like when there's purpose to it, it's so much easier to go through. And when you're seeing progress, it's like, fine, go for it. We're making progress.
You eventually got the credit card companies just so into. How did you eventually convince these companies to drop what had to be a multi-million-dollar line of business?
That was hard.
Yeah.
I mean, we argued, and I brought the evidence to the VPs of Visa and MasterCard again and again and again. It wasn't until Nick Kristof released his groundbreaking article called "The Children of Pornhub."
We'll link to that in the show notes. Yeah.
And where he ends that article with these words: Pornhub is Jeffrey Epstein times 1,000. And he specifically called out the credit card companies in his article. Why are you still doing business with a company that distributes rape videos to the world? And at that point, there was thousands of follow-on articles to that, and the pressure was on. There was journalists calling Visa and Master, why are you still doing? But it was Bill Ackman, who is a billionaire hedge fund manager, and he read The Children of Pornhub. He was incensed. He has daughters of his own, and he reached out, and I got connected with him, and he learned the story. And not only did he just go on Twitter to express his dismay and call out Visa MasterCard, he knew the CEO of MasterCard from the tennis circuit, and he made a phone call. He sent some texts. He said, this is trafficking going on. Are you going to do the right thing? And Ajay Banga, who was the CEO of MasterCard at the time, said, I'm on it. And he was on it. And he actually, at that point, cut off the credit card companies, and then Visa followed, Discover followed. However, this was the time when they then, in a panic, because this was the worst thing that could happen to Pornhub.
Oh, yeah.
They took down, at that point, 80% of the entire website overnight. It was gone. Over 10 million videos, over 30 million images, in what Financial Times called probably the biggest takedown of content in internet history. And that was 24 hours. All their unverified content was gone because they wanted to try to woo back the credit card companies.
Look, we solved the problem that we swore was technically impossible, and we did it overnight.
Right.
Yeah.
Although they actually didn't.
Right.
But however, so this all happened and made huge headlines. But I found out that 2 weeks later, the credit card companies quietly snuck back to the advertising arm of Pornhub. So it was kind of behind the scenes because people don't see those transactions.
Right. Look, it's a different entity called Traffic Junkie and not
owned
Pornhub.
by Pornhub, owned by MindGeek. And then it was round 2. It was 2 more years of fighting. And it was only until, so Bill Ackman got involved again. We went on Squawk Box calling out CEO Al Kelly of Visa after Visa was not let out of their motion to dismiss in the case where Serena. So Serena was a young teen. She was exploited on the site. Her videos were uploaded again and again, millions of views. She would beg for the videos to come down. She'd be hassled. They would say, prove that you're underage in the video. Prove that you're a victim. She didn't have to prove that when it was being uploaded, right?
Of course. Only when you want to get your personal stuff removed.
Exactly.
Insanity.
Even if she would get it down, it would get re-uploaded again and again. And it sent her on a spiral of despair. She dropped out of school. She was a straight A student before all this happened, never kissed a boy before. She dropped out of school from bullying. She got addicted to drugs to try to numb the pain. She tried to kill herself multiple times.
So terrible.
She wound up homeless, living out of a car. But she sued Pornhub. And not only did she sue Pornhub, she sued its individual owners, the hedge funds, and Visa. And Visa lost their motion to dismiss her case. And that is when everything imploded.
Sure.
And
I assume they settled, right? Because
it's still ongoing.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
God, the discovery involved in this is a nightmare for them.
But they lost the motion, and that was when the pressure was on. So then we publicly were calling out Al Kelly. Her lawyer was on Squawk Box as well. And finally, he made a personal statement, and he said, I'm a father, and we're finally, cutting off Pornhub once and for all.
I'm taking hell for this at the country club. That was the final straw for me. Now that I'm personally being embarrassed by my friend Bill Ackman. Yeah.
So then it happened, and
interesting.
that got demonetized by the credit card companies, lost all mainstream advertisers. All of that happened.
It is crazy that you have to prove who you are to get your stuff removed, but you don't have to prove who you are to get this stuff up in the first place.
All right, a quick break. I'm going to tell you about something that'll actually make your life a little bit easier. I regularly take shots of Ketone IQ plus caffeine from HVMN. It is 5 grams of ketones, 100 milligrams of caffeine from green tea. So no sugar, no crash, just clean, focused energy. Now, ketones are molecules that your body naturally produces during fasting, intense exercise, or a low-carb, high-fat diet, so aka ketosis. And when glucose, carbs, aren't readily available, your liver breaks down fat into ketones, which then become an alternative fuel source for your brain and muscles. And our body likes using ketones because they're a high-efficiency fuel, especially for the brain and the muscles. Ketone IQ from HVMN skips that whole process, gives you pure, drinkable ketones, so you get the benefits of ketone energy without having to fast for days on end or go full keto. I take it before I hit the gym. It gives me that steady, locked-in energy without making me feel like I'm kind of vibrating a little bit. And I also take it before I need to do a show. Same deal. I feel focused, same steady energy. And it's not just me. Team Visma, Lisa Bike, literally the best pro cycling team in the world. They use Ketone IQ to fuel their races. These guys won the Tour de France twice, dominated all 3 Grand Tours last year. Olympians, Ironman champions, they're all on this stuff because it works. So if you want to try it, go to ketone.com/Jordan. You'll get 30% off your first subscription order and a free 6-pack of Ketone IQ. That's these little things right here. Get energy that actually works. Ketone.com/Jordan. Links in the description.
It looks like Pornhub, you mentioned that they buy user-generated content in bulk from developing countries that don't verify or moderate. So they might buy 1 million videos, I don't know, from a Vietnamese website or something, and you just have no way of knowing if any of that is legal in the United States or not. And there's a near certainty that at least some of it is not. It's real. The categories you describe in the book, we won't do it on the show. They're so barfy. Examples are like runaways or like raped homeless teens. The one that stuck with me was people being sealed into vacuum bags or tortured in ice and waterboarding. I mean, it makes you go, what sort of unhinged psychopaths are watching this?
Yeah.
I get the male drive to watch people bang. Like, I get that. why would you want to see somebody being that part, the torture part that's where you go, wow, this is really feeding some unhealthy stuff.
Yeah, and they had hundreds of thousands, if not millions of views and had been on the site for years, many of these videos. And, one of the things that happens is this dark kind of spiral where I hear this a lot from people who come forward and say, hey, I was addicted to this since I was 8 years old and 10 and 11 and even, when they get into it later. But that obviously there's the psychopaths and the people who are just instantly drawn to that kind of content. But sometimes people go down a road, they don't even realize they're going down.
The rabbit hole thing.
It's like, so with porn, the dopamine hit, you don't necessarily need more porn, but you need different porn to kind of get that same hit. And so what happens is you kind of go more extreme and more extreme. Some people do. Some people don't, right? But then it can lead to where you're watching things that you never would have imagined that you would have started with in the beginning.
I would imagine there's also morbid curiosity that leads to, I don't know if they have an algorithm. Maybe they do. I don't know.
Oh, they do. Yeah. And they would actually push. So that's how I ended up seeing so much of this illegal content because people all over the world, when they would come in contact with an illegal video on Pornhub, they would search around the internet, oh, Laila Mickelwait, she's trying to, and then they would send it to me. And so I would get the link, and if I clicked on the link, then the algorithm springs into action. So if you see one horrific rape video of an unconscious woman, well, then it thinks, okay, well, I'm going to push more of that. Then you get more and more and more. So you kind of go down that, I call it the hellhole of rape on Pornhub.
I wonder if Google and other companies are retargeting you. Do you get weird ads that pop up where you're like, oh, this has to be because of the Pornhub clicks?
Oh, that has definitely happened to me. But to the point of ads, one of the things that was horrific to me to realize, but not surprising, was I actually got to investigate Traffic Junkie, which was their ad arm. And the way that they would target advertisements, so they would sell ads, first of all, they gather so much data about people. So people think they're going to a free porn tube site anonymously. Well, they're getting your, if you don't use a VPN, IP address and income and browser and all this stuff. But anyway, they would sell ads to advertisers targeting specific content. So they would suggest things like, you could find rape in Chinese or, not 18 or very young teen or screaming teen, all of these different things. And then they could advertise on a particular video to people who they understood would be interested in their product. So on a child sexual abuse video, I would see an ad that would say, delete your history after clicking here. And it was targeted to pedophiles.
Right.
So that okay, let me click on that ad.
It's clever copy.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Disturbing. That's what I'm saying about like the rabbit hole, like the hellhole of your algorithm. But man, it really does show you how this can corrupt your mind. And I'm not, the audience knows I'm not religious at all, but there's no way this kind of stuff is not horrible for you, just psychologically to consume. I mean, you hear about it all the time with people who've been through things. There's no way there's not like some sort of porn PTSD that you get from looking at this crap on the web over a certain period of time, especially the horrible stuff.
Well, the scary thing too is that kids have free access to this site.
Yeah.
So like the worst things I would never wish on my worst enemy to see that I have personally been traumatized by witnessing on Pornhub. Any child.
10-year-olds now seeing that.
I just had somebody message me 2 days ago that said, I got addicted to the free porn tube sites when I was 6. Oof. And it took me on a dark path. And so, not knowing that they're not only seeing the hardcore content and the porn content, but actually they could be witnessing real sexual crime as their sex education, creating their sexual template, creating their sexual desires and what they understand about sex from such a young age.
Oh, it's horrible. 6 years old. My son is 5.5, and I mean, I have to help him build Lego sets, for God's sake. It's just too young to have any sort of It's way too young.
Yeah.
That's really disturbing. I would love to talk about the impact in the payoffs from your investigations and your takedown, because the insurance and the lenders dropped the CEO and the executives, so they got to sell. Tell us what happened here, because this is the part where I was just like, I need to go get a coffee and turn the volume up, right, when I'm in my car.
Yeah. That was pretty incredible what happened. I mean, like I said, they deleted all of that content, but immediately they started getting phone calls. They were getting dropped from, like, on a personal level, from their insurances for their many rental properties that they had, luxury rental properties all over Quebec. And suddenly their lenders were dropping them, their insurances. Suddenly they couldn't drive their Lamborghinis and their Maseratis and all the kind of luxury cars they had, because they were being dropped from their car insurances.
Are there morality clauses? Like, you have to insure?
It's called, they were blacklisted in Canada as a moral risk.
A moral risk. So it's strange, right? Because, like, let's say I drive a Lamborghini and then I suddenly get caught doing blow at a club with Leonardo DiCaprio. Now my car insurance can say, hey, man, you're immoral. I mean, look, the drug use aside, like, we don't like what you do. I love that these guys got dropped, but it is a little scary that an insurance company can decide
I didn't know that was even possible.
Appropriate behavior. Yeah, it seems like, wait a minute, what am I missing?
Yeah. But in their case, it was, I was glad that they were kind of getting payback for all of this. They were just, for us, it was just sick. He's the CEO and minority shareholder, because they had been exposed and they were getting held accountable.
Just taking Uber everywhere. Just, Laila, this is your fault.
I mean, that was happening. They were losing mainstream business partners. All the mainstream advertisers were canceling their, even KY Jelly, Astroglide will not advertise on Pornhub anymore. Weed Maps will not advertise on Pornhub anymore because of all of this. And the CEO and the COO were finally forced to resign. And the company was sold as a distressed asset.
My God, tell me you didn't immediately crack open a bottle of wine and just feast on the deliciousness of that revenge. I mean, that must have been so nice to see his personal life imploding. Like, couldn't happen to a better guy.
Well, one of the things that was just, talk about, like, just reward in that moment of the big takedown that happened was the fact that I was getting calls from so many victims who were just crying with joy and relief that for the first time in years, their rape videos were finally off of Pornhub. And it was like they could finally breathe because they had been fighting for so long for these to come down, and finally they were gone. And that was probably the most meaningful thing in all of this when that happened. But at the same time, we're still fighting. Like, we still feel like justice hasn't been fully served, but we're glad for the things that have happened.
It was so satisfying, and this is in the book as well. It's so satisfying to hear the Canadian Parliament tear apart the CEOs and the executives of Pornhub over at MindGeek. It was just like we weren't prepared for the questions, and I can just see the guy just sweating on TV and being like, oh my God, my life is over. Why did I agree to this? Somebody help me, and nobody, no one's coming to his aid. It makes me want to download the video of that and the hearing and upload it to Pornhub with the title, CEO Brutally Ass on Camera by Canadian Parliament. #gangbang. That was just like, I know you have that on your computer for rainy days where you're just like, I'm having a bad one. I'm going to watch Faraz get bent over by this
There's been some good, like, compilations where it's like fail, like everything that they say, the way they answer. And it's, very rewarding to finally see them being grilled and failing.
Like, you thought you were above the law. Yeah. Here's you not being above the law and being embarrassed on TV internationally.
Yes.
Of course, later evidence shows they hid evidence from law enforcement. It's shocking.
13 years.
Yeah.
Hiding all of the child sexual abuse. So in that parliamentary hearing, the heads of the leading child protection agencies in the U.S. and Canada, that they would have to report those videos, child sexual abuse, to them. It was mandatory reporting in Canada. And they testified that they had not gotten a single report of child sexual abuse for 13 years. They were hiding all of that. And the serious consequences that is I think, how many children could have been rescued from situations of abuse if they had been reporting and not hiding it from authorities.
Yeah, that's oh man, that's disturbing to think about. What about the employees? 1,800 employees. Don't these people wake up and go, Oh, yeah, that New York Times article. Wow, I had a feeling we were up to no good, and now surely people started to leave.
They were just jumping ship.
Like, imagine that on your LinkedIn. Aren't you? You work there? Isn't that the thing from New York Times where you abuse kids and you're like, look, I'm just an accountant. Leave me alone.
They hide they will take it off LinkedIn. They don't want to have MindGeek on there at all.
Resume gap. You might as well put jail, right? That's a hell of a resume gap if you've been to MindGeek for 10 years.
After the New York Times piece, so many employees were jumping ship, just quitting by the entire departments were gone. Like the HR department was gone, you know. So
oh my God. One little petty bit of satisfaction as well. Faraz's new mansion that's being constructed, it mysteriously burns down, and this is where people go, oh my God, that's terrible. But didn't it turn out to be his neighbors, or do we not know?
We don't know.
I see.
Who did it. Now, unfortunately, they were trying to kind of turn the fingers, at me and the Trafficking Hub movement for motivating X, Y, and Z. But clearly, it was a professional job. It was done by somebody who knew exactly what they were doing. They raised that entire tens of millions of dollars of a mansion to the ground without even touching the neighbors. And it was in hours. I mean, there was a huge fire. It was insane that happened. I mean, thankfully, they actually weren't in the house because they were building the house. They were at the last stage of construction. So as much as I hate anybody and want to see people face justice, I don't want to see them. Yeah, but that did happen. And we don't know, even to this day, was it somebody within industry? Was it an angry, was it the majority shareholder who was angry? Was it... they lived in this place called Mafia Row in Montreal. Yeah. And there's, hints that it could have been their neighbors because their neighbors were so mad. Yeah. That they had reporters knocking on the doors of the neighbors' houses with cameras in the neighborhood all of the time. And then they found out that he had done all of this, that they'd been hurting children. And before that, they already hated him because he had cleared like hundreds of trees to build his monstrosity of a mansion without a permit and all of this. And they were angry at him anyway. So
that was the last straw.
I think it was
Tony Soprano,
the
of
neighbors.
Montreal. Yeah,
I don't
know. You are on the wrong side when the mafia's like, you're just too immoral. I can't live near you. These guys who made their living embezzling and, I don't know, extorting small business owners or whatever.
Good point.
Like, I draw the line at this. Did you ever think about quitting? I mean, people are threatening your family. They're threatening your kids. They're accusing you. You're getting calls from the sheriff that say you're being accused of having child sexual abuse material or whatever. I mean, there's got to be days where you woke up and went like, this isn't, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. Oh, yes. That definitely happened. And, there was, like, I wrote in a chapter called, like, Before You Break. And it was because so much was piling on at once. And my uncle, who I consider my brother, was dying of cancer. And I was kind of seeing him through that, the stages of death. At the same time, all of this was so intense. And I was so conflicted, too, because I have 2 young kids. And I'm spending so much time on this. And it was just hard. And there were times when I want to stop. I don't want to do this anymore, but I couldn't. I felt like it is an honor and a privilege of a lifetime to have the opportunity to be able to lead something like this. And sorry, I'm getting emotional about it, but
that's great TV.
Yeah, I just couldn't. And I didn't, as much as I really wanted to, I really didn't want to because I want to see this through. I wanted to see this through to the end, and I wanted to see justice fully served, and I still do. Yeah.
Well, you're a badass, man. I mean, maybe I'm just a former half-ass lawyer with a strong sense of justice, but it is so satisfying to see these people's feet held to the fire. The banks, the credit card companies, the abusers, the traffickers. I got to hand it to you. I'm on team Takedown for sure. And I'm waiting for them to come after me for, she was slandering us. It's like, I don't know. I don't shy away from a good fight. Scientology tried that too, and I was like, let's go to Discovery where we dig in all of your records, and then
good for you.
Go ahead. And then they just suddenly don't care anymore because they were never actually going to do it. They love to scare you. And then when it comes down to, no, I want you to pay your lawyer $30,000 retainer so that I can dig into your records too. And they're just like, suddenly, well, actually, you're a small fry. We don't really care. It's like, now you need to decide whether or not this fight is worth it for you.
Good for you.
And I mean,
I really like you.
Likewise, right back at you. Pornhub is still online though, man. Like, what's next for you? Because it's not It's not gone.
Yep.
Do you want to get rid of the whole thing? What's the goal here? There's still work to do.
My dad taught me a lesson. You know, he was a man of integrity, and growing up, if he said something, he meant it. And you knew that he was going to, at least as much as he possibly could, try to do what he said he was going to do. And I feel that way. You know, it wasn't a light thing when we started this to say the petition is called "Shut Down Pornhub and Hold Its Executives Accountable." And I still feel that justice fully served in this case looks like Pornhub does get shut down. We're 91% of the way there. So they have had to take down 91% of the entire website.
91%?
Yeah. So since the book was written, more has come down. And we found out that they have gone from 56 million pieces of content to 5.2 million today.
Wow. Wow.
Yes. And so they're 91%. And the rest of the content that's on there, most of that was only verified uploaders. And we know the problem with that, right? Where the individuals in the videos were not verified.
But not the people who are in the video.
Yeah, so they need to take down the rest of that content.
Jeez, wow.
But this is not important. It's not important just to see justice served, to get vengeance for victims, and that's important.
Sure.
That's important for their healing, because they can say, yes, the wrong was recognized, right? And somebody paid for what happened. And that's an important journey on their healing process. However, it's also important to be a deterrent to future abusers,
yes.
right? Because this is a risk-benefit calculation. And until we make the risk greater than the benefits that these companies get by maintaining the status quo, they will continue. And so we have to make an example out of Pornhub to say, and we're seeing this already, like the other porn tube types are already trying to, clean themselves up, to get rid of illegal content, to change their upload. They don't want to end up like Pornhub.
Right. You said you made an example out
exactly. And that's why this is a way, when we're fighting trafficking, we have to increase risk and we have to eliminate profitability. But we also want to see policy put in place to make sure this doesn't happen again. So really the solution at scale for this is to mandatory third-party age and consent verification for every single person.
Third party's important.
In every video.
Otherwise, it's just trust me, bro.
Oh, yeah. I would never want anybody to give their ID to Pornhub. Yeah. Not in a million years.
I can't imagine they have good internal, this is all stored encrypted and we're not going to misuse this at all.
They're facing a class action right now for data exploitation as
really?
well. Yes. So
what does that mean?
User data exploitation. So they were, without consent, gathering user data and monetizing it and whatnot with advertisers and Google and all of that. So they're facing that. So I would never want that, but there are reliable, privacy-respecting third-party companies that can age and consent verify. And that has to be done, and it has to be done at scale. And so what I think is really key here is, yes, governments have to do this, but the credit card companies have to do this. Because when Visa says, we do not do business with user-generated porn sites that don't verify age and consent, immediately, quickly, internationally, all of these porn companies that are highly motivated by profit will quickly fall in line.
They'll figure out a solution
to
this.
They will immediately figure it out.
Because it creates an immediate market for that third-party verification, and that overnight becomes a $100 million plus or whatever business.
Right, and because they don't want to lose the financial transactions, they will comply.
For sure. Even if you charged at scale 20 cents per verification or 5 cents, the scale is enormous. Pornhub has more traffic than Netflix. Those millions of videos, if let's say it costs 25 cents to validate the models in each one. This just adds up so stinking fast.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And that's why they want to resist it, right? Sure. Because they don't want to pay.
Right, it's their money.
They don't want to pay, but that's why these things have to come by force. They have to come through pressure, continued public pressure coupled with strategic civil litigation that puts enough pressure on the right pressure points, right? Financial and the public perception to force those changes, to get Visa to do this, MasterCard, governments. And then I think we're going to have a safer internet for our kids for generations to come. That's the goal.
In part, thanks to you.
Well, thanks to all the people. I have to pass that on. Yeah, involved. That's what I say. When people often say, congratulations to me, it's like, thank you. I had the honor of a lifetime leading this movement, but I'm an activist, and I was, able to help activate people. And it was this amazing team from journalists and lawyers and law enforcement and victims, most importantly, who came together.
Those people are very brave. The victims are very brave because You know, if I had a video of me being drugged and raped as a kid, I don't know if I'd be like, I'm going to shout from the rooftops about how wrong this is. I might just be like, I just want to go on with my life, man. This is humiliating.
Yeah. And I mean, and some victims, like, 100% feel like they feel justified. They feel like that.
Yeah.
Then there's others. And maybe it's that DNA thing, right? Maybe it's like, it's in them. They have this fire. Like, they want to speak out. They want to, sound the alarm. And they're really motivated, too, by... I don't want anyone else to have to go through what I went through.
Yeah. Again, very admirable. What is the connection between mainstream platforms like Pornhub and actual child trafficking? I mean, you kind of talked about this on the show, but would you say, I mean, they almost make the market for this.
Well, some of the most popular categories on these sites, and these are the free porn tube sites, are things like teen incest. And the problem is that these sites have not verified the age and consent of those who are in those videos, because these are the YouTubes of porn. And so because they don't verify age and consent, anyone can anonymously upload, and they're uploading real sexual crime of real teens, right? Because teen, it's 18 and 19 is legal. Everything else is contraband. It's illegal. And so a lot of times, rough sex and kind of hardcore content is very common. There's a huge market for that. But at the same time, if they're not verifying consent, there's no way that they can tell the difference between rough sex and rape. And what's happening is so much rape, so much assault, so much non-consensual content is being uploaded onto these free user-generated porn sites.
In your opinion, how much responsibility do executives at companies like Pornhub bear for the child abuse happening on their platforms? Because I assume their argument is we didn't know about this.
Oh, in the case of Pornhub, we know they knew.
Yeah.
We know. We have evidence, we have conversations, we have email exchanges, we have documents, we have policies. We have so much evidence that this was something they knew about, they hid from authorities, and because of profit, because they wanted to maximize profit, they allowed to continue for years, since 2007. And so 100% responsibility, because they have the ability to stop it. They had the ability in 2007 to age verify, to make sure that somebody had to show an ID, to show their face, to consent verify before they could upload, and they chose not to.
What role do financial institutions play in enabling or covering up exploitation in this particular industry? Because yes, the credit card companies eventually bailed, but how do they get paid now? Bank wire?
Yeah, they have bank wires that they can pay in crypto, the way that they are, monetizing the sites. But enablers is the key word. There are the bad actors, and then there are the enablers, those who allow them to continue the exploitation for profit and who benefit themselves from the exploitation, knowing that it's happening. And so as much as it's important to hold, what I call corporate traffickers, mega pimps accountable for the exploitation, criminal exploitation happening, you also have to hold accountable their enablers who have, the judge, Cormac Carney in California, in a case that is suing Visa and Pornhub for monetizing child sexual abuse, what he said was that Visa gave Pornhub the very tool through which to complete the crime of knowingly benefiting from child trafficking. I think he said it very well.
Yeah. I assume that's what he said in there when he rejected their motion to dismiss.
Yes, exactly.
The lawyers must have got that, and they're, puckered up real tight. Because when it's just, no, I want to hear what the other side says, that's bad enough. But when it's, no, I think you enabled this completely, and you were crucial in that.
He called them
that's a bad weekend.
What it was is co-conspiracy.
Yeah. Oof.
And so that's serious. And so that's the key to this, is holding the bad actors and their enablers, and the enablers have the power to stop this.
Right. They just have to make a tough call. We're going to lose $25 million a year in fees.
That's the price to pay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you're profiting from a criminal enterprise.
Exactly.
So, it was good while it lasted. Turn off the faucet. It's the right thing to do. What are the common signs that a video on a site like Pornhub might involve exploitation or trafficking? Is it just the tags?
Well, I mean, there's some where it's obvious, right? That, this is non-consensual. Could be prepubescent, and you could see that, right? Or there's violence, or, yes, tags, titles indicating young or, pain, things like that. However, sometimes these are videos that were consensually recorded and then non-consensually uploaded. So then in that case, you have no idea whether they consented to having that video on Pornhub. And victims of this kind of, they call it image-based sexual abuse. That's all the way from child abuse to what we used to call revenge porn. And they face serious amounts of trauma as well. So, the suicide ideation rate for these victims is about 50%.
Oh, wow.
And so the harm is, from the revenge porn side all the way to the child sexual, it's all serious. And so that's the thing, is that when you're on a site that doesn't verify age and consent, not only of the uploader, but every single video and every single person, every single video, you have to be suspect of everything that you're watching.
Wow. How do law enforcement and regulatory agencies fall short when it comes to addressing these crimes?
I'll give you an example. So with Pornhub was criminally charged by the U.S. government for knowingly intentionally profiting from the trafficking of over 100 women in a particular sex trafficking operation in San Diego. And instead of full prosecution, they were offered a deferred prosecution agreement. They were told to pay $1.8 million, which is nothing to a company like this, and have a government monitor over their site for 3 years. And I think the way that they're failing in a situation like that is a slap on the wrist or nothing at all, where we don't see them putting the resources, the time, and the attention necessary to actually create a big enough risk for these kinds of abusers to face serious consequences.
Sure, so this is just cost of doing business at this point.
It becomes,
$2 million
exactly.
fine? All right, whatever.
That is the cost of doing business. And that is not serious enough for them to actually stop engaging in that kind of conduct.
Right, it has to be a sort of catastrophic amount of money. I mean, that's why, like the hot coffee case from McDonald's, right? If they just had to pay her $600, $6,000 medical expenses, they would have been like, well, we're not changing the temperature of the coffee. Once they had to pay, $12 million, they're like, dang, we need to change the temperature of this coffee. You got to do something like that against these websites, so they're not going to listen.
And that's why I'm really hopeful with regard to the civil litigation side of things, because it doesn't rely on anybody with the will of the victims and their amazing attorneys. And today, since 2020, we've had almost 300 victims sue in 25 lawsuits, including class actions on behalf of tens of thousands of child victims.
Oh, wow.
And they're doing well. Those class actions are certified. They lost their motions for summary judgment. They're going to trial. Like, they're doing well. And so I actually have more hope in the civil justice system to hit these companies where it hurts than even the criminal justice system to actually hold them accountable.
That's actually often how it goes, right? It's the bar of proof can be a little bit lower. The standard of proof is a little bit lower. Evidence standards can be a little bit lower. It's just slow.
Yeah, it is. The wheels of justice turn slowly. That is absolutely true.
It is.
Yes, but they turn.
Based on your research, what percentage of videos on mainstream platforms or on platforms like this might feature exploited minors?
Might feature?
Yeah.
I would say, so on Pornhub, we have a percentage of them that we know, 20% of the content was from people who considered themselves in the kind of professional model category, although we know that there was criminals infested in there as well. And 80% of that site was user-generated, not verifying age and consent. So I would say on these sites, the possibility that this could be illegal, if there's a site that's not verifying age and consent, is probably over 80%.
Oh my God.
I mean, not to say that is the percentage, but the possibility that it could be is that. Now, we actually have some concrete numbers to show that at one point, Pornhub was admitting in the height of all of this happening, they said, well, 1%, they did like an audit of themselves, and they said, well, we think that 1% of our content is child sexual abuse material, and that would be confirmed, known, hashed, previously uploaded child sexual abuse material. That means that it was 1 in 100 videos could be child sexual abuse.
But that was when they investigated themselves.
That was when they investigated themselves.
Imagine how much worse it actually was.
Right.
Jeez.
So I mean, think about that. If people are browsing a lot of videos per session on those sites. And,
that's really something. What would you say to somebody who believes that the trafficking or the exploitation on these platforms, it's rare, she's exaggerating? I'm sure you've heard this before.
Yeah. I would just say that, one instance like Serena's instance, one instance like the 15-year-old girl from Florida who's missing for a year and found in 58 videos on the site, I mean, that would be too much. But we know that the site was actually infested with videos of real sexual crime. That would be, the spectrum of abuse. And this is not exaggerated. Like, most of the content on the site, yes, was legal and consensual, but too much of it was illegal, and that they were profiting from all of it, and it was knowing. And so I guess that's just whataboutism too, because a lot of people say, well, what about this site? And what about that site? I say, okay, well, let's hold them accountable too.
Sure.
Like, I'm focusing on this one predator. We don't do that with individuals. Like, when we see Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein, we don't say, well, we're not going to hold Jeffrey Epstein accountable because Harvey Weinstein was doing it too, or Bill Cosby was also raping. No.
Somebody getting murdered in New Jersey doesn't go, look, people get murdered in New York too.
It's like, we hold them all accountable.
Right. You all go to prison, hopefully.
So that's the way the law works, and that's the way it is in this case.
Why do you think the public remains largely unaware of this particular issue?
It is shocking to me that after 5 years of this viral campaign, of all the thousands of media articles that have been written, the lawsuits, everything that's happened, most of the time, most people say, I had no idea that this ever happened, that it's happening, that's a problem. And I think it's just because we just haven't reached kind of like a saturation point where we've talked about it enough for it to be common knowledge. And so that's why I'm so grateful for conversations like this. And I think it's because people are uncomfortable.
Yeah.
They're afraid to talk about it. It's one of those things that's like, it's affecting everybody in some way. We're all kind of in contact with this free user-generated porn industry, but nobody wants to talk about it.
That's true. Well, even my friends and my producer wife were like, "Oh, this is kind of an icky topic. Not like we shouldn't cover it."
And that's true. And that people want to a lot of times kind of shy away from these uncomfortable and dark topics.
You know what, though? Podcasts that will cover this, we sell way more books than those morning shows. As fun as they are, the 5-minute segment on Morning Joe is just not going to move as many copies of something like this anyways.
Well, I appreciate the fact that, this obviously is not the first time you've been covering this issue of sex trafficking. I know I've heard other episodes that you've had on this, and you definitely don't shy away from the hard topics.
No, if you're not going to talk about things that matter, you might as well have a morning TV show on network TV.
Yes.
No thanks.
That goes to legacy. I love your Ryan Holiday episodes too, where you think about
he's
the real meaningful.
He's a good friend of mine.
Topics,
talks about stuff that matters. Life's too short to talk about things that don't matter. If you could speak directly to the executives at Pornhub or the financial institutions backing them, which you have done actually, what would you say to them right now?
Back when this was all happening?
Sure, why not?
I would just say you are knowingly benefiting from the exploitation of countless victims, and you actually have the power to stop it now, because the porn sites are highly motivated by the credit card companies, and they absolutely had the power to stop it. And we did say that, but they didn't want to until they were forced to.
Until they were forced to. Holding their feet to the fire. Layla, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.